I'm with my good friend Riley Cote, coming to us from the northeast of the United States, former Philadelphia Flyer, Canadian. So, as many of you know, we have an office in Canada and New Brunswick, Canada. So hockey has been near and dear to my heart for many years. Riley's also one of the founders of Athletes for Caring, which is a wonderful advocacy group that advocates for professional athletes who want to use cannabis in their professional life. I love your story, Riley, because it is truly an advocacy story as well as a personal self-help story. And it really, both sides of that, I think, are very compelling to hear from people. I'd love to hear a little bit about your journey. I know you started very young with cannabis and that you really attribute cannabis to your longevity in your hockey career, which is an amazingly storied career. I'd love to hear your perspective and your journey on cannabis and how you ended up where you are today.
Sure. Yeah. It's been an interesting ride for sure. And my relationship with cannabis has evolved, obviously, since I originally was introduced to it when I was 15 years old or so. Yeah, I mean, the long and short of it really is that I was introduced to it as most in a recreational setting with no understanding of the plant itself and what its real true purpose is. So it was a lot of times mixed with alcohol and just misused a lot of the time. It wasn't really till I turned pro at the age of 20 that I really started to recognize its true therapeutic and medicinal value. But again, without any sort of literature to back it up and science to back up what I was feeling and experiencing, but helped me. That was when I turned pro and started taking on this role of the enforcer and fighting. So as you can imagine, the anxiety and the performance anxiety, but then the fighting and all that on top of it, that's when I really started to make sense of what it was doing, helping with that and helping me sleep, so I could actually get some sleep, knowing I was going to fight the next night. And I went through my pro career with Central Hockey League, East Coast Hockey League, American Hockey League. Eventually worked my way to the NHL with the Philadelphia Flyers, and had used cannabis all throughout my pro career. But it was a series of physical injuries as well as some concussion issues that cornered me into retiring. So I actually ended up retiring at the age of 28. With one more year left on my contract, but it was just a much needed escape and exit strategy that I needed to really tackle, just for my own personal mental wellness and spiritual wellness. But it was really in that moment when I retired that I started to understand cannabis as medicine. Really, I started to read and explore, started to learn about these minor cannabinoids, CBD predominantly, and as well as a couple others that really,
they're not so minor.
Yeah, exactly. Right. That really had, anti-inflammatory properties, as well as neuroprotectant properties. And me being had been a banger in the hockey world, fighting 35 times a year, it only made sense to really tackle the issues that I had caused with this plant that I just misused. So I just kind of redirected my focus. Obviously, my relationship with cannabis had changed, more precise dosing, more CBD, just more of an actual intention behind what I was accomplishing versus just sitting back and burning the herb, which was nothing wrong with necessarily, but there was actually some thought behind it. So I guess that's it in a nutshell. It just evolved from just really kind of a mindless, recreational tool to a very therapeutic tool. Then obviously a very medical tool to actually help mitigate some of the damage that I caused with my brain and some of the inflammation that I caused from some of these surgeries and whatnot. So it's been amazing help. One of the most amazing tools that I've really landed up using mindfully since I retired.
Well, you use the word mindfully, and that's one of the common threads I find when I talk to people like yourself, patients who have gone on this cannabis journey and started illegal in the illicit market, and later on in life discovered really how to manage it and use it mindfully. One of the common threads I hear is cannabis really does promote the mind-body connection, and is that mind-body connection that it helps you heal. Talk to me about that, because that's just, I hear that over and over and over and over from patients who are, partway into their cannabis journey, who are trying to manage chronic pain, inflammation, brain injury, whatever it might be. And everybody comes down to, it helps me talk to my body more meaningfully. Would you agree with that?
100%. Yeah. Well, cannabis is a conscious forming substance, right? It actually brings a sense of awareness and consciousness, to the physical body and the mind and the spirit. I don't think we recognize that when we mix it with alcohol and mix it with other drugs necessarily, where you kind of just use it as a drug, as a recreational substance. So the whole idea really is to tackle the body, as you mentioned, the physical, the mind, and the spirit together. And that's what the disconnect is from some pharma, or the current model that we're living in right now, is kind of like one symptom and one drug, or one treatment option. So the idea is to tackle it as a whole, as it should be. So I think cannabis, outside of its obvious physical helping properties as far as managing inflammation and pain, and the mental health, the anxiety, and the sleep, is that it really, like I said earlier, it brings a sense of awareness. So you're able to be more in tune with your body, and it helps people maybe make sense of where some of their traumas or their blockages lie, so they can actually address them more mindfully, versus really being in the dark and kind of looking at their situation and their condition as like, oh, I surrender, we're doomed type of deal, where this allows us to raise the consciousness and awareness enough to be able to tap into different healing modalities. I think I mentioned this to you last time. I always say, like, cannabis is a crutch. It helps people walk. So the next step, if cannabis can help you do that, is maybe get to the yoga mat, and maybe, get into some mindful meditation, or take your healing to that next level. Because as we know, it's a never-ending journey, right? I mean, our bodies are constantly trying to rid themselves of inflammation. We're constantly trying to keep stressors and anxiety at bay. We're constantly trying to promote a good night's rest. So it's evolving, but the cannabis plant is pretty interesting when you look at a lot of these other drugs that are legal, that are unconscious forming, right? I mean, you look at alcohol specifically.
Alcohol, all those.
Yeah.
In NHL, NFL, and all your circles, that was the primary go-to drug, which was as a numbing agent.
It is exactly that, and it's a neurotoxin. And yeah, exactly. There's nothing about it that helps increase performance, right? It's funny. It's almost like, how could elite athletes or elite performers not recognize this, right? But I guess we're trained to be law-abiding citizens, so when the legal substances are legal, you tend to lean on them. And alcohol is a pain management tool, whether it's physical pain, emotional pain, spiritual pain. People are burying themselves in alcohol because they're just looking for some sort of help, right? And cannabis is illegal, and the alternative is an opioid or whatever else you're talking about for pain management. So people are handcuffed, right? And they're trying to do the right thing under the scope of what the law allows. Unfortunately, it's toxic as hell. It destroys spirit and physical bodies on a daily basis. And the people or the players that kind of recognize this and started leaning on cannabis quietly are the guys that I've seen be more mentally well on the back end of sport. It's because, again, the awareness and the consciousness, it's just allowed them to see the bigger picture, and allowed them to maybe take that risk to say, oh, you know what, my physical, mental, and spiritual wellness is more important and I'm willing to risk my freedom.
Extend your career if you can tackle those issues.
Exactly. Yeah, that's exactly it.
Every person I've met who in your circles with athletes for caring has a very similar story, that cannabis extended their career, improved their performance. And I've talked about it quite often as cannabis as the performance enhancement drug, as opposed to be looking at it like a drug. And one of the things I'm fascinated about is, opioids versus cannabis for pain management. And every study you see, without exception, opioids takes away the pain. It goes from a 10 to a 0. It works. And cannabis moves the pain from a 10 to an 8, but the quality of life goes through the roof. In other words, you're able to manage the pain better. And that's been my experience as a chronic pain sufferer. Is it doesn't make the pain go away. It makes me able to go out and exercise and manage the pain and get in the pool or walk or do something I might not otherwise be able to do.
Yeah.
And that's the common theme I hear from professional athletes who push their body to the max. that cannabis is your performance enhancement drug. And I just love that term. Talk to me about that.
Yeah, I know for sure. It's interesting because we have to almost be careful on how we use that term, because all of a sudden, the policy makers, the gatekeepers themselves will be like, whoa, we got to keep this outlawed for our players, and because of that term, right? When at the end of the day, it's about harm reduction. It's about, drug diversion. It's about maintaining and keeping your athletes healthier, right? I mean, that's what it should be about. Everyone always talks about, our children, our youth, and our, this and that, and we're trying to keep everyone well. Why don't we give them the right tools to begin with, right? Versus these really destructive tools. You talk about an opioid. I mean, yeah, it brings a pain from a 10 to a 0 because it numbs the shit out of the human spirit and body. Where it's not sustainable. And the people that think it's sustainable are usually the ones that get swallowed up in addiction with it, misuse it, and substance abuse, and hopefully they can survive all that. But a lot of times you land up, dying from that type of treatment. Cannabis is interesting. You said like the 10 to the 8. I think cannabis is just a different mechanism where I think it helps. Maybe not necessarily, yes, it's a pain management tool, but I think it helps helps you change your focus. You're not focusing on the pain. You're focusing on maybe being more creative, or, being engaged in another activity where it helps kind of divert your focus somewhere else and not on the pain. So I think inadvertently it helps with more pain management than what you're saying, because you're getting your mind off the pain and you're able to do something else besides just sit there in pain. Which is a beautiful thing, right? That's what it's supposed to be. And it's sustainable. You can use cannabis long-term without, having a real true natured addiction. I think you can abuse anything. Yes, of course. But I mean, to me, I said harm reduction. I certainly would rather have my players using cannabis than an opioid, or even alcohol for that matter, because how many guys have been down that deep, dark path with alcohol itself, let alone you mix in an opioid. So it's always about at least giving the guys the best solutions when it comes to pain, inflammation, anxiety, stress, and sleep. That's the recovery process. That's when we regenerate. And the beautiful thing about cannabis, outside of just pain management, it's all these things I just mentioned and more. It's not just pain management. It's stress management. It's anxiety management. It promotes awesome night's sleep. You can wake up in the morning feeling fresh versus an opioid. Yeah, it manages the pain. It kills the pain. It's a painkiller. And then what's the side effect? An addiction, but also constipation, bizarre sleeping patterns. And the list goes on. When you're not sleeping properly, that's when appetite. Yeah, exactly. So then you get into this cycle of having to take other drugs or substances to help alleviate those side effects, which is a really, really terrible cycle and destructive cycle to get into. And I've seen it several times, and it's not a pretty ending for the most part. So yeah, it's just almost polar opposites trying to tackle the exact same problem, but with so much more positive benefits and obviously way more destructive.
You got to experience the positive benefits as a player, but you have to experience those positive benefits quietly, obviously, because of the illegality of it. The new generation of players that are coming up today, especially since there are so many teams in Canada, help me understand what the NHL is doing and what players are doing active players in relation to cannabis. I'm curious to hear, what their view toward the plant is now compared to your generation coming up in hockey.
Sure. I guess you could say pre-CBD craze and pre-legalization in Canada, it was mainly just dry flower type of cannabis that we've all seen growing up. And that was what guys were using. And even back in that era, I would say 50% of guys were using cannabis. Quietly, obviously, right? There was every league I played in, there's always like 2 handfuls of guys that would quietly do it. And, they were the potheads and whatnot. Then, you fast forward to the CBD craze, 2014, that introduction to that farm bill, all of a sudden there's a new type of cannabis product that's on the market that doesn't get you high. And all of a sudden it's, marketed as an anti-inflammatory, a sleep aid, all these things that are super attractive to an athlete. So then you find a whole group, another class of athletes using CBD products, in one way, shape, or form, whether it's tincture, flower, vape, topicals, you name it. So even guys that might be more conservative around cannabis, now they could be like, oh, I can use this because it's not getting me high. And then, when legalization happened in Canada, all of a sudden it was just like, oh, wow. It's just like, okay, it's just like taking any other supplement. However, the international border is a very real thing. And obviously policies and politics are built around that. And unfortunately, cannabis still is a banned substance in hockey. They, even back when I was playing, they tested for cannabis and they still do. However, they're not enforcing the drug policies to suspend guys for cannabis. So there's some work to do, but I think until the U.S. actually legalizes it in some way, shape, or form in a medical program, there's just a lot of liability around the NHL, to travel. Like, what's your stance? If you start promoting it just because it's legal in Canada, then you get guys traveling with it. And then all of a sudden it's like a different type of problems we're dealing with. But I would say now, between CBD products, legalization in Canada, and just more awareness overall, I would be shocked if 95% of guys.
It probably was a big secret.
Yeah. Now it's so open that I was in the Flyers locker room at the start of this year, and every player is taking CBD products, including the coaching staff. But the coaching staff is even making fun of guys smoking weed, because they know they are, or using some sort of cannabis-based product with THC. But in their mind, they're actually wise enough to understand that I'd rather have my guys using cannabis than going out and drinking a 12-pack or whatever they're going to do.
That's a long way. Just in 5 years. Holy man.
Right? It's crazy. But you went from like the Broad Street Bullies, that era of like, just like play hard, win championships and drink beer, to like this evolution of just training, obviously the strength and conditioning, the resources and the amount of money poured into recovery. Then all of a sudden cannabis was all this, the devil's lettuce for all of society. All of a sudden it's like, pro athletes, high level performers are using this as a recovery agent. So, I mean, it's like, how could the science be that off? And it was obviously nothing more than politics, but here we are, and the cat's out of the bag, and we got a lot more work to do, in my opinion.
And I agree with you. I think I agree with you. Nothing's really going to change till federal legalization in the United States. But I do love the fact that Canada is hockey, and hockey is Canada, and it's legal in Canada. And therefore, I think it has lent a big hand in helping improve the destigmatization of the plant in North America.
Yep.
And that's a pretty big deal. As far as I'm concerned, I think it's wonderful to watch the attitudes change so rapidly.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like, I mean, people going to jail still to this day, but to looking at it as a plan. One of the things I love to talk to you about, Riley, is we talk about the mind-body connection, and we talked about yoga and kind of the whole. I think what cannabis has done for the athletic community, and I think you're one of the leaders in this, is talking about it holistically. How does it promote wellness? How does it promote mind-body connectedness and mind-body spirit? And these are things that you don't hear when you talk about painkillers like opioids or Xanax, and I really think that, to me, that's the most fascinating part of the evolution of cannabis, specifically in sports, is the idea that just breathing can improve your performance. And that cannabis is a unique plant in the way that it can promote that mind-body awareness that no other plant or medicine can do. What is it about performing at the highest level in sports that makes that important? I'm a former marathon runner. I'm too old to do that now, but I get the concept of pushing yourself and pushing your body and why that's important. Help me understand from a retired hockey professional player's perspective.
Well, I think, athletes, as you know, are always trying to look for an edge, right? I mean, you're trying to sustain your career. You're trying to stay healthy. Obviously, some guys are better at that than others, based on their lifestyles. But, at the end of the day, everyone is really trying to lengthen their career and recover as quickly as they possibly can and give themselves the best chance. So naturally, they're always looking around for solutions, right? I mean, you see like the supplement craze and, this and that, everyone's promising this and that. And, a lot of the times that's just a bunch of garbage, at the end of the day. But you look at cannabis, it's the real deal when you talk about regeneration, repair, and recovery. for athletes that are really, whether it's a contact sport or not, it doesn't matter. I mean, you could be a golfer on, and golf 18 holes, and it's less wear and tear, but there's still inflammation. There's still stress, and there's still, the need to sleep. So it doesn't matter what sport you play. It doesn't matter if you sit at a computer all day, working 9 to 5. I mean, it's all recovery at the end of the day. But I think athletes, at least in the last 10 years, are certainly a lot wiser than they were the previous 20 or 30. But they're just wise enough to know what works, obviously in tune with their body, and what doesn't work. And I think there's been a lot of trial and error. You've seen guys go through substance abuse programs for booze and opioids and sleeping pills and anti-inflammatories, you name it, all together. And guys don't want to go down that dark path. So, naturally, the cat's out of the bag. I mean, you just experience cannabis. You could make sense without even understanding the science that, wow, this does kind of make me feel more relaxed, helps me sleep and the whole bit. So I think it's just guys being more in tune overall. There's more conscious athletes, and there's so much money in sport. And if you are banged up from an injury you could have prevented, or if you go into a substance abuse program because of an addiction, you're pulling yourself out of the lineup, and someone's taking your job, and that could be the end of your career. I mean, so it's just there's a few reasons, but obviously money, just performance, recovery.
At the end of the day, it's money.
It's money, right? It's your livelihood.
You're a professional player. That's your career. That's your source of income, and you're going to try and do everything to protect that.
That's the truth.
It cracks me up that an illegal substance is what's helping people do that.
Yeah, and outside of like the athlete bubble, it's because it's so effective, right? I mean, Mother Nature's intelligence is perfect. You can never recreate it, and that's why plant medicine is a threat to the big dogs, right? I mean, it's very obvious once you start peeling back the layers and you understand, especially cannabis as an industrial resource outside of the medicine itself. I mean, cannabis is arguably the most
it's going to disrupt a lot of markets. There's no question it'll disrupt a lot of markets eventually.
Yeah, exactly. So, unfortunately, it's profit over people. It's not about people's health, even though they spin it as such. Yeah. So there's a lot of needless suffering and confusion and hardships that come along with it, unfortunately. And then here we are, speaking for the plants. It's interesting, but all we can do is speak the truth about it. And obviously policies are slowly changing. I'd like to see, obviously, Biden's been historically a prohibitionist, and I would like to think some of his colleagues could maybe help him shift his opinion, but I think it's,
he's the wrong generation.
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, a little bit of speed behind it would be nice, but I think, most people now at this point can make sense of it as, say, medicine or therapeutic.
So you have your fingers involved in a lot of different business ventures. What are some of the things you're involved with? Talk to me about, because I know you're involved with a CBD company. Talk to me about that.
Yeah, so all under the umbrella of holism and wellness, right? I'm in the yoga space. I'm wrapping up my yoga teacher training. My second one. I have a hemp derived CBD and functional mushroom company called Body Check Wellness. That's been around for 2.5 years or so. Also an advisor and investor in a psilocybin mushroom company out of Jamaica, where they actually recently just got the first ever DEA import license for their own mushrooms out of Jamaica. So, but again, it's a full package deal, right? I mean, wellness is not just one little tool. It's a series of tools. So I want to kind of be genuine with my delivery of how I view wellness and, physical, and the mind and the spirit. Right. And it's all these things combined. So, a little bit of everything, just passionate about it all, because I think, between cannabis and the, say, psilocybin or the plant-based, entheogens are the future of psychiatry, future of mental health treatment options. And again, yoga, it's like you cannot replace the work. I mean, you were an athlete, you understand the work you got to put in to be an athlete, but you got to put in the work to be a human too. We can't just eat a nutrient depleted diet of Doritos and Coca-Cola and then sit around on our couch and then expect to be well, right? There has to be some effort on our part, and we don't have to go CrossFitting and doing this hardcore exercise. I think just some simple mindful movement, just going for a walk and just being in tune again with, your diet and what type of supplements you're using. And again, it's raising awareness and consciousness. And I think all these things that I'm talking about do that. Yeah, I mean, you can never exclude the work, and the work is just being human. I'm not talking about physical labor in the rice fields necessarily, but just like, staying on top of your body. I mean, you got inflammation, you got some pain. Well, you got to address it. Otherwise it's going to get worse. And if you don't, I mean, it just builds up and then you become, unhappy, right? I mean, if life is about finding joy and happiness and being fulfilled spiritually, well, if you're in pain all the time, if you're 100 pounds overweight, or, if you're not doing these simple human fundamentals, there's no way you're going to ever find these states of being. So,
I wish we had more time to talk, because I could do a whole half an hour with you just on homeostasis alone.
Right.
But
We'll do it. Do a part two.
I will say, we can get to that, but I will say this. I am so looking forward to seeing you soon, now that COVID is coming to an end, finding a good view with a mountaintop or a beach and doing some yoga with you, because I think that would be really special.
Absolutely. Let's do it.
Riley, it's been a fabulous time chatting with you. I always learn something new. You're a great teacher, and you're a great advocate for the plant. And we as a community really appreciate your voice. And we're thrilled that you took a few minutes to share some time with us today.
Yeah, I appreciate you having me on. Do it again.
Okay.